Okay. Hello, I want to talk to you about religious calendars and time. Religions can measure time in terms of reference to the cycles of going around the sun, that's the solar calendar, or the cycles of the moon, the lunar calendar. And they can vary even within religious traditions. The solar and the lunar can also relate to the question of whether time is understood to be lineal or cyclic. The religions, the Abrahamic religions, have a lineal understanding of time, a beginning, things happen in history, and an expectation of an ending. Whereas the Eastern religions generally go on a cyclic understanding of time and speak in terms of ages or aeons or epochs. For practical purposes today, we all use a calendar that measures time in a lineal fashion, and that the starting point, of course, is reference to the birth of Christ, hence to the year 2020 is a marker from the time of Christ. But the difference today is that whereas in an earlier period, even until quite recently, the notation of a year was AD, so 2020 AD. Nowadays it's 2020 CE. Why? Because CE just references a common era reference point in terms of a historical marker, whereas in the term AD encapsulates the notion that time has a theological or religious dimension to it. AD means in the year of the Lord, Anno Domini in the Latin. So that today all countries generally use this common calendar. But within countries, within parts of the world, there are different religions, and they will measure time quite differently. And of course, things will move relative to the common era year. As we know, in Islam, Ramadan starts at different times during the year. But even within the Christian tradition, where we have fixed dates for most things like Christmas, Easter is always in a particular period, but the dates will shift, and that's because whilst the calendar is primarily a solar calendar, measured in terms of the Earth going around the sun, the Easter dates are governed by a lunar dimension, hence it shifts. And on top of that, you have within the wider Christian community, for example, a difference between the East and the West. We know that the Eastern Orthodox churches, their dates always seem to be different to the West. And people scratch their heads and wonder why. And that's simply because of one, namely the Western traditions are using a calendar called the Gregorian, and the East is using a calendar called the Julian. And there are differences between those. So time is an interesting dimension and is very important in terms of religions, and we see it reflected in our calendars.